Hi, this is Senator Malcolm Roberts, and I'm broadcasting from Parliament House in Canberra. This is my live stream today instead of tomorrow because I'm committed all day tomorrow. And I also will be rushing again today because I have to be in the chamber in about 15 minutes to support Pauline. Something big's come up, and really big. But I just want to go through a summary of the week. First of all, the budget. That's what it's all about, really, the budget. These three headline items. Mining and agriculture have saved our country yet again. Secondly, the energy relief plan that Labor is putting out is an admission that net zero has failed, has completely failed. Thirdly, the government and the Reserve Bank of Australia are stomping on the brake and the accelerator at the same time. I'm going to explain each of those. I talked about it in Sky News, but here we go. Mining and agriculture have saved the country yet again. For at least a decade, the officials in Treasury have been too pessimistic about our mining and agriculture industries when they set the budget. Then, just before the next budget comes along, everyone acts surprised that the prices for our agriculture and mining exports are far better than forecast. So there's a huge windfall, and we have a surplus that came out of nowhere. The only reason we've got a surplus is because mining and agricultural products, exports, had high prices this year. Now, the taxes from our exports are a big windfall. We've seen some record high prices for our export commodities. And Treasurer Chalmers could not even mention the words mining and agriculture when he delivered his budget speech. He said the surplus is due to the prices for the things we sell. Let's be specific. Coal, iron ore, bauxite, and agricultural products from farms. That's it. That's what's enabled all the spending that he's come up with. High employment is another downstream effect of having a very healthy mining and agricultural sectors. All of the service economies in our cities, those jobs go away when there's no primary industries making money, like mining and agriculture. Mining has a leverage of, for every job at a mine site, there are 6 jobs elsewhere in the region. 6 jobs. There are more people employed in Brisbane in the mining sector than in Moranbah. Did you know that? The solution then is we should be opening up many more coal mines, not blocking them the way Tanya Plibersek, the government's Minister for the Environment, is doing. We need to build more coal-fired power stations, and you watch the economy take off. The history of modern civilization, industrial civilization, is that the lower you can get your electricity prices, the higher your productivity, the higher the wealth generated for everyone. We can have abundant food and cheap energy if the government just gets the hell out of the way. The energy relief plan, the second point I want to make, that the government touts spending $15 billion on, is in fact an admission that net zero is failing to bring down power prices. It's raising prices alarmingly. For example, we have the highest ever proportion of wind and solar, batteries and pumped hydro in the grid. And bills are only getting worse, not better. The high bills are caused by wind and solar. Adding more will make them higher. That's the story in every country on earth. Bills are getting so expensive because of this government's climate policies that the Treasurer needs to step in and use taxpayer money, our money, your money, to cover up how bad it's getting. They're causing the mess, and then they're stealing from taxpayers to give subsidies to some of the people. Middle class, upper, higher income working families and small businesses are getting hammered. The power bill relief announcement is proof that Australians cannot afford net zero. Just got to keep an eye on the time. I've still got a few minutes yet. So the solution is we can have an Australia where people aren't afraid to open their bloody power bill. I know when power bills come, a lot of people today look at it and go, oh, will I be able to pay for it? And they tentatively open it. We just have to turn the bus around and abandon the net zero pipe dream, or the climate lunatics will keep driving us off the cliff. Energy Minister Bowen, he's the man responsible for this, but so is Anthony Albanese, and so is the Treasurer. They're spending our money on this nonsense, and it will destroy our economy. We need to remove all subsidies and net zero laws and let the cheapest form of electricity win. The third point, the government and the Reserve Bank are stomping on the brake and the accelerator pedal at the same time. For example, the Reserve Bank's solution to inflation which is due to government policies, the previous government in particular, but also this government. The Reserve Bank's solution to inflation is to send enough people broke by raising interest rates that they stop spending money so the economy slows down. Bloody marvellous, isn't it? That's what they're doing. The Treasurer, at the same time, is trying to shove economic sherbet back in people's pockets by giving them handouts to compensate for high electricity prices. This is completely at odds. The Reserve Bank is trying to stop people having money, and the government is now ensuring people get more money, or some people get more money. Jim Chalmers is claiming, the Treasurer, is claiming that nearly $15 billion in handouts has no inflationary effect. That's complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. And every serious economist has disputed it. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. Government spending is far too high. We're heading for over 26% of our gross domestic product being spent by federal government, plus state and local. More than a quarter of our gross domestic product spending is being spent by government. We can't keep that up. Solutions then, we need smaller government, and we need it to spend money on productive infrastructure that grows our capacity, grows our productivity, and grows our exports and grows our domestic product without inflation. When you have productive capacity, it reduces the input costs so that the prices you have to pay. So that stops the inflation. We can fix inflation by simply opening up the economy, having a serious conversation about cutting red tape from excess bureaucracies, green tape, excess regulations from the environment, which have gone beyond and they're now damaging the environment, and UN blue tape for the UN restrictions like that we sign up to. They don't force us on us, so don't ever think that it's a hopeless cause because the UN's forcing it. UN has no control over us. It's our dopey bloody politicians in Canberra that sign up for this nonsense from the UN. The power is in the politicians. The power is actually in the people of Australia because we, the people, elect the politicians. So stop electing bastards that are signing up to UN treaties and World Economic Forum treaties. So we need tax reform, comprehensive tax reform to get more taxes paid by multinationals. They pay bugger all tax. Pauline and I have been on about this for years, and now the government is saying, oh, well, we will tinker with what you've been saying, the PRRT tax, but they're just doing it in a minute form. They're just doing it, just saying they can have a headline saying that they'll get multinationals to pay more tax. The Liberals did it with Apple and someone else, but they just increased the tax just marginally. So they're still getting away with raping our country. We need to grow the supply side, as I said a minute ago, that produces products so that we have cheaper products and more efficiencies. Instead of sending everyone who has a mortgage broke, I've still got a few minutes. The fourth point that I didn't mention in the headlines is that government is using immigration as a Ponzi scheme to keep the total gross domestic product up. The total gross domestic product. For many years prior to COVID, our gross domestic product per capita was negative, or the growth in it was negative. We were in a recession. COVID's disrupted things, but we're coming back now, and the government is making our housing and rental crisis worse by letting in 1 year, 400,000 net new immigrants into the country. They'll all need a roof over their heads. So the gross domestic product will be shown to be going up, but Australians' lives will be getting worse, and per capita, the gross domestic product will be lower. We need to stop the flood of immigrants, catch up with infrastructure. And the government today, I'm going to read from some notes. Yeah, we've got time. I've just delivered a speech, but I can't remember everything perfectly, so let me just put this up. Some notes here. The government is still debating their Housing Australia Future Fund to provide $2.5 billion over 5 years to build small homes for disadvantaged Australians. Sounds wonderful, but the Prime Minister, the reality is a false one. The Prime Minister is falsely implying this bill will sort the housing crisis when it cannot possibly achieve that. The total value of Australian dwellings is just under $10 trillion. $10 trillion. We need as much as $1 trillion worth of new housing by 2030 to meet the needs of everyday Australians including the immigration flood into this country. This government is offering $2.5 billion when it needs $1 trillion. That's 0.025%. 0.025%. If the Prime Minister was interested in actually solving the housing crisis, the first step would be to slow down the obscene level of immigration pouring into cities without homes for them to occupy. He would address foreign investors buying and locking up new homes so they can be sold as brand new in a few years' time when values increase. So foreigners are coming in from countries that don't allow Australians to buy housing or real estate or even industries in their countries, for example, China. They won't let us buy over there, but we let them buy here. They come down here, they buy, they lock it up. There's something gone off the rental market, so up go rental prices. If he was serious, the Prime Minister would address short-term rentals, pushing long-term rentals out of the housing market. He didn't do any of those things. His solution is an investment fund that will make no noticeable improvement to the housing crisis. It actually, if trends continue, it will actually be taking money away from housing because the returns on the future fund, Housing Future Fund, will be negative. As well as creating a whole new bureaucracy to advise the government on improving housing. Look, bigger government, I'll be frank, I've said this for many years now. Every major problem in Australia, in our country, comes out of this building that I'm sitting in now, Australian Parliament House in Canberra. Every major problem. And if it didn't get created there directly, it's been worsened considerably. Every major problem now has a new solution with Labor. Bureaucracy created it, but they ignore that. They just add more bureaucracy. Labor is creating three bureaucratic institutes to tackle the housing crisis. When all we need is to look at history and we find that doesn't work. One Nation proposes getting down to basics. First of all, these things I mentioned in my speech. Cutting immigration until housing and infrastructure catch up. Cutting red tape, green tape, and blue UN tape. All three of them are massive, and they drive up the price of houses. A few years ago, I ran a seminar in Queensland Parliament House when I was in the Senate, and we had an economist there. And that economist said the cost of building the house, not the land, the cost of building the house in Houston, Texas, a major city in America, is roughly the same as the cost of building a house in a major city in this country. What's the difference? Land prices. Absurd regulations on the environment, which are actually hurting the environment, and delays. That's what drives the cost up. Plus, in this country, 50% of the price of a house is tax. 50% of the price of a house is tax. So that brings me to my next point in our policy for fixing Australia's housing problem. Comprehensively reforming taxation to give Australians a fair go. Get money from the multinationals who, in many cases since 1953, have paid little or no company tax. That's not me saying it. That's Jim Kalali, the former Deputy Commissioner for Taxation, looking after large companies and foreign companies. Next solution is to shrink the government to fit the Constitution. The government is a parasite. It doesn't add value. It's a parasite. We need to stop the government, the federal government in particular, from growing and instead shrink it to fit the Constitution. And last of all, we need to get government out of people's lives, enabling people to make choices that suit people's and families' needs. When the government gets into the market for housing that is already short of tradies and building products, it only drives the price up. We need to get the government out and let prices stabilise and just come back to basic common sense. Instead of bureaucrats looking after themselves and trying to look good, we need to let the tradies get on with the job of building houses. Look, there's the last thing I need to mention. Pauline tried to introduce a bill, future legislation, into the Senate today. It's almost an unwritten rule, an unwritten custom in this place that anyone who introduces a bill is allowed to introduce a bill. Later on, they can choose whether or not they vote for it and support it or not. So it's not a decision on whether or not the bill passes. It's just a decision to introduce the bill. Something that has been really hurting and annoying people of Aboriginal descent, Aboriginals in this country, is the way non-Aboriginal people are claiming to be Aboriginal. The figures are stunning, and Pauline's going to do a video and a media release about this. Australia's population, I've forgotten the period, has grown 8%. The proportion of Aboriginals has grown 25% in that same period. Because we're spending almost double per person, the government is spending almost double per person on Aboriginals than it is on non-Aboriginals. And some people want to get that cash. This is a huge insult to genuine Aboriginals or part Aboriginals. Genuine insult. Anybody can claim Aboriginal status. That's not right. That shows a huge disrespect to the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals have been asking us to clean it up. And Pauline today introduced a bill to do that. As I said, it was just to get it into the Senate, and then she was going to send it to an inquiry so it can be properly scrutinised. But so many people in Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal are saying, for God's sake, get on with defining Aboriginality clearly. It's now at dog's breakfast. Anybody can apply almost. Define it clearly for the sake of all Australians. And that unwritten code was broken today. The Liberals, the Greens, Jackie Lambie Network, David Pocock, the Labor Party, all voted against even allowing the bill to come into the Senate. Not to debate it, but didn't even allow it to come into the Senate. The only one who stood up was Pauline Hanson, myself, and Ralph Babet. So these people, and the Liberals told us they would support it. The Liberals are gutless. The Liberal Nationals voted against even introducing this bill. As I said, it is very, very rare that a bill is not allowed into the Senate. Very rare. This is something so many Australians, Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals, want. And yet the Liberals, Nationals, Greens, Jackie Lambie Network, Labor Party, David Pocock, all said no. That's a suppression of democracy. You can't even debate that bill. So Pauline's going to be introducing that every bloody day from now on. So I've got to go now, and that's the wrap-up of the main items this week. I'll be tied up tomorrow, Friday. I normally do this on a Friday so I can answer more questions, but if I'm committed on Friday, we'll try and do it whenever I can fit it in on the Thursday. So thank you so much for watching. Look forward to hearing from you and answering questions as soon as I can just calm things down and we've got a few minutes. Thank you very much. Look after yourself.